Choice of friends.
One day, at the break of dawn, a crow perched on a tree near the river Godavari saw a fowler approaching. The crow eyed him suspiciously. The fowler fixed his net, scattered some rice on the ground, and hid himself in the hollow of a tree. A little later, the king of pigeons and his flock happened to fly past. One of them spotted the grains on the ground. He and others urged their king to stop and feast on them. As they flew nearer, the king grew skeptical. He spoke aloud of his fear that this looked like a trap to him. However, one adamant pigeon did not want to give up the feast for vague fears. The others too supported him. Taking no heed of the king's warning, they all flew towards the grain. Not wanting to desert his subjects, the king reluctantly followed. The crow had heard every word and knew that the king was not only wise but also very noble. No sooner had the pigeons started pecking at the grains, the fowler's net trapped them all. All pigeons started blaming the bird who had dismissed the fears and led them all to come to the grains. But the king pigeon, the just one, spoke like a true king. He scolded his subjects not to blame one, for they too had readily followed him to share the feast. His next task was to think of a way to free his flock. He thought for a while and struck on an idea. He told his subjects to all take off at the same time when he signals. Meanwhile, the delighted fowler had come out of his hiding. But his happiness was short lived, as the king said, "One, two, and three." They all flew away in unison. The upset fowler tried following them, but in vain. He had also lost his net. The crow had seen this all and followed the flock to see how they would get rid of the net. This was the worry of all the subjects. The king, however, was confident of his friend, the king of the mice. He led the flock towards the forest where the mouse lived. The crow too perched himself on a nearby tree. Down in his retreat, when the king mouse heard the commotion caused by the descending pigeons, he was alarmed. He did not dare venture out. But then he heard the familiar voice of his pigeon friend calling out for him. The king mouse rushed out in delight, but was shocked to see the net all over them. He ran forward towards his friend to gnaw at the strings, but the pigeon king stopped him. The pigeon king was clear. The king mouse was to first free his subjects and then finally him. The king mouse, however, did not want to risk the life of the king. He was afraid his strength would not last till all the subjects and finally the king had to be freed. But the king pigeon once again spoke like a noble. He said that the death, if came, would be to save another life and it would be fair. The king mouse was moved by this nobility. So was the crow. It was this that gave the king mouse the strength to hold out until all the pigeons were saved. The pigeon king was the last to be freed. The king mouse then gave all the pigeons a sumptuous treat. Finally, thanking the king mouse, the king pigeon and his followers flew away. As the king mouse was about to go back to his retreat, the crow flew down to him. The crow requested that he too would like to be friends with the king mouse. He had seen his loyalty towards his king pigeon friend and was highly impressed. But the wary king mouse was worried that being a crow's natural food, the crow would eat him up next. But the crow genuinely persuaded and requested the king mouse not to turn him down. He said that he valued the friendship and if the king mouse would turn him down, the crow would fast until death at his doorstep. The king mouse was touched by the crow's devotion, and from that day onwards, the two became the best of friends, giving each other their choice pickings of food and animal gossip. But then one day came when the crow realized that food was getting scarce for him in this forest. He did not want to leave his friend, the Mouse King, but he had to move away to another forest where his old friend Tortoise could get him fish and more food. The King Mouse could not imagine a life without his friend. He insisted that he too would go with the crow. So the two friends set off for the forest where the tortoise lived. When the tortoise saw the crow, he was overjoyed and he welcomed the newcomer also. The crow explained how the food was getting scarce in their earlier forest and introduced the loyal friend, the king of mice. The tortoise welcomed them with open arms, and so the three friends lived happily together. One day, as the tortoise was about to go for a swim in the river, a deer came panting up to them. Apparently, a hunter was after him. The tortoise welcomed him too and asked him to snack on the lush grass, have water, and get along with the new friends. The deer had his meal as they waited for the tortoise. The deer told the crow and the mouse that he had taken a shortcut to this route. The hunter would eventually reach this place as it was on his way. So the mouse and the crow decided to leave this forest with the deer. But just as they were wondering how soon the tortoise could come over, they heard the frantic cries of the tortoise for help. Alas, their friend had been caught. The hunter had picked up the tortoise and fixed him on his bow. The mouse quickly devised a plan to help the tortoise. He directed the deer to go and lie across the hunter's path as if dead. He asked the friend crow to hover over the body as if to peck the deer. As expected, the hunter soon came by. He took the bait. He put down his bow along with the tortoise and ran towards the deer with a knife to shoo away the crow. The mouse quickly came from beyond the bushes and gnawed at the binding strings. The tortoise was soon freed and leapt into the water to safety. The deer meanwhile was alert and sprang up and ran away just as the hunter came near him. The dejected hunter was at least happy he had a tortoise. But to his dismay, he realized that the tortoise too had escaped. He realized this happened only because he was greedy. The tortoise thanked the king mice, but the modest mouse pointed out how all of the friends had risked their lives to save his.